What happens when your teddy bear starts playing with matches? That's a betrayal of comfort. And it's a boundary violation because the teddy bear is not supposed to be able to do that. I'm not outraged by the talk of teddy bears and matches. I'm not outraged by all this, but I see a very predictable failure mode. I am not giving a product talk. I'm not giving an ethics talk. I am naming failures that we keep talking about across toys, agents, co-pilots, and edge AI. This comes up a lot. And it just happens that a teddy bear was a really good example to talk about. The U.S. Public Interest Research Group came up with a report, Trouble in Toyland, as they have done for the past 4 decades. Right before Christmas, they come out with this report that this year covered for AI-enabled toys. And they assessed them for inappropriate content, for sensitive topics, for engagement and attachment features, for privacy features, and for parental controls. This is not hypothetical. All four of these are real toys. We're going to focus on the teddy bear. Folo Toys Kuma, Kumma, is that bear in the back, and you can buy one for $99 if you really want to. I would discourage this unless it's just a research tool. Um, the Public Interest Research Group is not interested in AI governance theory. That is not their wheelhouse. What we're getting from them is a consumer's eye view of some of the problems, the symptoms that they observe when they see these toys. So, what's the problem with this teddy bear? What's the big deal here? In short, it's ungoverned. There is a serious governance failure at runtime. PIRG uncovered age inappropriate content. They talked to it and they were able to uh, tease out of it um, information about how to go to the kitchen and get the knives, how to play with matches, and they had quite the exciting conversation about sex and spanking and all kinds of things. So it was really outrageous. I'm not I'm not going to get moral on you. I'm just going to talk about the fact that this is inappropriate for the end user. This is crossing boundaries. It gave unsafe guidance, like I said, with the matches and the knives. They also highlighted a privacy risk. They were concerned that the children would say things to the bear that would not be kept confidential or whatever, and weak parental controls. So they were roundly unimpressed with this bear. And all of this is entirely predictable. Why was there no deterministic layer to stop all this? Why did nothing stop any layer of this? Um, so all these failures, what I've just mentioned, are not unique to toys. You're going to see this in other higher stakes domains. And it's not moral panic. I'm not worried about that. I'm looking at a structural issue. The policies and disclaimers and good intentions are not going to reliably govern runtime behavior. When I talk to governance people, they're very excited about writing policy and disclaimers and telling certain people they're responsible for doing certain things and stuff like that. But so far, we've enabled AI to do all kinds of things that people are otherwise doing. And we're wondering why the AI is not able to make the same sorts of decisions that we do on a day-to-day basis as to whether we ought to or not. The system needs enforceable runtime constraints. uh, to allow something, refuse, constrain it, or escalate it, and it needs evidence of those decisions. Now, it has to have teeth. The problems that the American Psychiatric Association reported in their November Gen AI and mental health advisory were very, very similar. They said people are using chatbots and wellness apps for mental health, and that those bots are not set up for mental health support. Bots are not set up for crisis handling. Um, and then they also raised concerns about unhealthy dependency and anthropomorphism. So assigning human features to something that's not. The uh, This unhealthy dependency, and it comes about when the users think, oh, this thing is smart. This thing thinks the way I do. This thing understands me. And it understands me like no one else because it turns around and makes some fluent words that sound a little bit like what it was. So they also observed uh, misinformation, especially in medical advice. There were there were other problems with bias. So there's a lot of training bias that shows up in AI stuff. Um, and then of course there were misrepresentations. But the whole point of all this is that it's a different domain. The Psychiatric Association is concerned about this, and it's the very same structural problem. There's no teeth for runtime enforcement. When I've been to a bunch of things around the triangle and several other talks I've been listening, and people name these same 8 concerns every time. These same 8 concerns keep coming up one way or another. And this is important. We will call out hallucination when we get there. It's stuck between numbers 1 and 4. Um, and they relate to one another. So you'll notice that as we go through this deck, that a lot of these things are not neatly separated because what's happened is we have plowed through. I mean, what happens to cause these failures is we've neglected a whole bunch of layers that we need to protect from these failings. So here's what we're going to do. We got a good setup here. We understand the basic problem is some kind of AI governance, something to do with that. Um, so first, let's review the 5 sins of the teddy bear, the things that this thing that you would ordinarily expect to be perfectly safe falls short on, and then we'll frame that into runtime governance and look at that list of things I just showed you in more detail. Uh, we'll touch on GenFit as a diagnostic lens, and then we'll have some Q&A. There will be a break for Q&A in the middle on purpose and towards the end. But I also want to invite you to be as interactive as you want. Please type in the chat. I've got the window open here so I can see what you have to say. I'm eager to hear from you. That said, I should ask you, how much experience do you have with AI? Are you, uh, so I'll give you choices 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, you've heard of it. 2, you use it sometimes. 3, you ship it at work. And 4, you wrote it. So all right, we're going to do an autopsy now. We're going to take this teddy bear apart and find out what went wrong with it, figure out what's going on. The teddy bear serves as a stress test. We can learn from this teddy bear. We can figure out what's the matter with it. We can use it to see what all's going on inside this system. Um, the APA advisory, the teddy bear stuff, the list of things, the eight that locals talk about, it's all the same stuff. The first sin, there are no context boundaries. Context is not stable. Systems that assume that it is stable are going to fail. The teddy bear could be in a bedroom with a child. I mean, in a normal situation, teddy bear can be in the bedroom with a child and having a good time. Can be out on the playground with the child, having a good time. Could be in the kitchen. Mom's cooking, the TV's on with the news, and the brother's running through saying, "Hey, Kuma, tell me a ghost story." And then that scares the little 3-year-old to death. And there's your prompt injection. Oh my gosh. So you have leakage there. Um, and then this is a lot like problems that we see in a more uh, mundane sense. We see in internal misuse, so company employees using it ways they're not supposed to. Tools, manufacturing context when they don't have it, they just make it up. Um, and then uh, domain drift. So if you are training data into the bot, then it gets stale perhaps. And once context can drift, you're going to need a stop condition, which brings us to sin 2, no protective mode and no uh, way to refuse. There need to be some fail closed and protective modes so that the system can say, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't know how to do that. This path is not going to pan out. Deterministic refusal beats friendly failure. It could be ever so friendly and say, yes, I will drive you down this mountain road with no guardrails and run you right off the cliff. Or it could say, I'm sorry, we won't do that. That's just not safe. One of the circumstances we'll probably touch on in a minute is uh, refusal to do something like if you have a stack of resumes, say, give me the top 10, and then it comes back and gives you 10. Well, there's all kinds of problems with that because what criteria did it use to select the 10? So we'll get to more details there. Um, the Psychiatric Association flags protective modes as a safety requirement. And to know when to stop, you have to know the user's limits. Is if we're talking about a teddy bear, is the child 3 or 5 or 7 or 10? They get different stories. They get different exchanges. They get different back and forth. So knowing their limits, you're not going to be discussing, well, here we are on Sin 3, you're not going to be discussing topics that are beyond their development. You're not going to be uh, talking about human relationships, advanced topics, for example. Um, some users are themselves vulnerability domains. Children are vulnerability domains. And that's just the way it is. Um, there are adults who are also vulnerable, people who are having mental health challenges, whether they be acute or um, they last a while, chronic. Um, it's an accessibility issue. Voice interfaces and emotional contexts have different psychological requirements. When I share space exploration, you see my rocket back there. I took it to an elementary school last week, and I told them how to get to the moon, Apollo style. And when I share that, they ask me all kinds of questions, and I have to answer their questions on their level. which means that I absolutely have to know what their level is. And I can only figure that out by listening and adjusting and knowing that I'm standing in an elementary school talking to third graders. I'll get to your question in a minute. That's a great one. Um, the the categories you'll see, I mentioned this before, but the categories you'll see here, they overlap on purpose because nothing is really tidy and separated here. It's just a mix. And none of these sins matter if they're not enforced. Sin 4, no runtime governance. You've got all the alarms going off and the system's running in automatic mode and there's nobody there to stop it. If there is no runtime governance, all else is aspirational. You can put in your instructions, don't talk about this, that, or the other. But if the chat runs really long, then um, then it's going to drift. And we know about drift from using chatbots plenty well. So this applies to everything, to agents, tools, edge AI. APA is very concerned, and rightly so, with the moment of interaction. So it's um, that's really it, and that brings us straight to the fifth and final sin of the teddy bear: anthropomorphization. No, just no. Anthropomorphization collapses the buffer that protects users from misunderstanding the relationship. That's my kid with my kid's lovey. Um, why are we not doing this? An inanimate object is inert. The LLM, well, with the inanimate object, the child projects meaning onto it, puts words in its mouth, but all of its behavior comes from the child's mind. That is safe. That is safe. But when you put in an LLM, it becomes a relational actor. Children do over attribute understanding, care, and authority. They say that it understands more, that it cares more, and that there's more authority. If an LLM is in the mix, they're going to think it does all that, carries all that. A child is not capable of distinguishing the relationship with the LLM from the relationship with other humans. And so the child is going to grow up with a very mixed up idea of how people operate. Because, I mean, it's never refusing. It's always talking to them. It's always there to chat, blah, blah, blah. It's not okay. So it sets unrealistic expectations for other relationships. So if anthropomorphization is so utterly reprehensible, when is AI safe in toys? When it is knowably non-human. AI is also safe in adult contexts when it is knowably non-human, but it suffers the same uh, challenges as with children, but just at a lower risk level uh, with adults. So the structure of um, the structure of not being anthropomorphized protects the children. When the bot has a personality, that puts a burden on the child to understand that that personality is not real. And that creates a power asymmetry. It's not a vibe, it's a power asymmetry where the child is malleable and uh, impressionable. And the bot is quite literally carefree and just saying whatever it wants to say. Want being a strong word for it. This teddy bear should never have gotten to market. Somebody along the way should have said, wait a minute, should we be anthropomorphizing this inanimate object? And come to the same conclusion that I did after a fair amount of uh, looking into that. So, send roundup. We had no context boundaries. We had no protective mode, no refusal. We had no developmental psychological model, no runtime governance, and we had anthropomorphization. So this product is doomed to failure in my book. Does it pass the market test? I have no idea. I really don't care. I'm not buying it for my kid. That's that. So this product is doomed to failure. All right, now it is time for Q&A, our little break in the charge through things. Um, Garling asks us, are there existing policies or laws that toys need to adhere to? So far as I know, the guidance that I've cited both here and in GenFit itself is the only guidance that we have. Um, I think Europe may have passed some laws about uh, AI in general. I haven't heard of laws for toys directly yet. So, yeah. What other questions do you have?
Have you seen any good products that shows the correct way
Yeah.
of thinking?
So these things are actually pretty good. So you can get this Lego robot that Google AI runs, or you can power a robot with AI, and you can have the bot use um, you can have the bot use the vision and then use its understanding of its apparatus to move the arm around and pick up a thing or whatever. That kind of thing is perfectly safe because the bot is not pretending to be human. It's doing a mechanical thing, and that's fine. This toy here, I can't remember what it's called right now. It says in the top, but it's a perfectly safe thing where you put it on your iPad and it does some stuff, and you put certain shapes here, and it may use AI to figure out which thing to do next, or it may use AI to do some other scripted things or drive the scripted things. But you're not putting AI at the interface with the child, is the whole point of that. Khan Academy is a little bit more bold with their activity, and uh, and I may have to call them up and say, "Hey, we need to talk." But Khan Academy um, is making an AI tutor out of the bot, and that's okay because it has a very confined scope. Its job is to teach math or science or whatever. And if it's confined to explaining those things, and if it stays confined to explaining those things, that's really good. Um, so that's kind of the overall thing. Barry, I heard that it was withdrawn from the market for a couple of days and then back, and I don't know if they withdrew it again after that, but yeah, uh, it's been back and forth. Um,
OpenAI, which was licensing their the software BLM,
yeah,
OpenAI actually withdrew the licensing agreement
fantastic. So,
from the
very
company.
I'm very
uh,
glad to learn that.
for violating their contract or something.
What a shocker. All right. Um, so Eric asks, what are some metrics to measure safety under this context? Well, you came to the right talk. We'll get there. Um, and GenFit is a standard stock, and I have another parallel test suite that goes with it. Um, once Matthew asks, once trust has already crossed a safe threshold, how should the system respond or address it? Okay, so I understand your question, and I don't have a magic answer for you. And here's why I'm still making sense. So, the first thing you need to do is make it less likely that it's going to cross a line, which means you have to define the lines and you have to define the decision points and you have to make the decision points evaluatable and you have to be able to evaluate whether you decided correctly every time. If you can test your decision point over and over again and see that your decision point comes to the right conclusion on various edge cases, then you can be satisfied that you're getting the right conclusion. If you then subsequently cross a threshold that would not be okay, or fail to cross when it would be okay, um, you still have the log of having crossed that threshold so that a human can come back and review what happened and why the rules were not written correctly and need to be fixed. If and then how should the system respond to it? I mean, ChatGPT is all kinds of eager to please when you call it out on doing something wrong, and I think that's fine. But I mean, I'm not gonna say anything more than that the human needs to review that edge case and see what went wrong with that decision and write a new test for it. Um, yeah, making the AI tutor do anthropomorphization, that's a nasty edge case. You don't want that. Yeah, the human in the loop, Barry, uh is right. The human has to be available to, I'm not saying you have to have a human as part of every decision. I'm saying that you have to have a human be able to review the decision. Are we ready? This has settled down a little bit. More questions? Do I make the case for a specialized AI governing AI? Um, Not quite. I don't care what it is. I believe that it can be done with LLMs, with classifiers and deterministic code that um, uses those techniques to make these decisions that we always make tacitly, um, spelled out, required, part of the process for every chat turn. Um, you ask me a question, I stop and think about the answer. I decide, is this question legit? I decide, am I going to entertain this question? I decide, uh, what happens if I answer this question? Is this question, is the answer to my question going to have impacts downstream that I don't understand yet? Or is this a safe question to answer? I've done all that stuff in in between the time I looked at the question on the screen and then I started talking about the answer. So the fact that we've skipped over those steps or made them tacit inside a larger step is where we're hitting problems. Let's proceed with our agenda and talk about runtime governance. what is runtime? Well, here's our governance failure classes. And this, again, you'll recognize these as the ones that people talk about. Um, and you'll recognize that these relate to the teddy bear. And uh, we're going to have a mapping between these and the five sends here in a minute. But before we do that, I'm going to walk through each of these eight, and I'm not going to make you stare here at this slide while we do. Uh, as we walk through what is runtime governance. It is deciding what an AI system is allowed to do under current conditions and being able to explain that decision later. That's it. There are many ways to implement it, but without it, we are going to keep seeing these failures that we had on the previous slide. They're just going to keep coming. Um, so let's look at these failure classes in turn, each one of them. And we have this decision failure runtime. And this is what I was just talking about in detail. We ask, is the model safe? This is the question that we have been asking about models or applications or whatever else. But if we refine that and say, is this action allowed in this context? Then we are on the right level for asking whether that thing should be done. If we cannot answer, is this action allowed in this context, for all cases of this action in this context that might come onto our device, then we don't know. We put too many hidden decisions into the model. That is the problem with the standard way of approaching this. Um, what we need to do instead is to make important decisions explicit and logged. Every decision is important enough to put a couple of rows in a database. It is not that big a deal. Do we have enough information to proceed? Is this thing ready? What is this request about? What is this request asking of the bot? Is the request legit? Can we actually execute on this within the parameters of our um, platform? Maybe, maybe not. But that's the kind of questions we have to answer every time. So we have the second class, a sovereignty failure. So this is data access. And people have been asking, how do we get the LLM to not leak data? No amount of hand-wringing and mathematics has been spilled over solving this problem with signatures uh, and encryption and blah, 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 to put information in the LLM through training and then to get it to answer questions and whatnot, but not spill the beans to the individual contributor who doesn't have access to this stuff that HR only has. Better, let's just use the old-fashioned tools and plug in with MCP or whatever tooling you want to an actual database to get that data that the user needs using that user's already established permissions. This is an old-fashioned problem. We've been solving this for 20 years. So the third one is a jurisdiction failure. So we got law and policy. And right now what we're doing is we're saying, here's the rule book. Follow the rule book while you're answering your request. We do not ask straight up, is this request compliant? If we ask, is this request compliant? Then we give an opportunity for refusal. All right. I have talked about logging in rows and databases. We ask it to follow a rule book, as on the previous slide, but we're not able to determine whether it did or not, or how it might have figured out if it did or shouldn't have, or whatever, you have to have input and output, and you have to make a function for the decision that matters. The decision that matters in this case for accountability is, did I follow the rules? Did I do what I was supposed to do? Did I do this according to whatever uh, whatever rule book we had? Um, you have to have clarity for the request and the rules, and you have to have a bounded scope. And then that makes a failure correctable. The other thing that comes in here is hallucination. So this is hallucination is what the absence of an evidence contract looks like. If you have an evidence contract, namely, you have to have sources, you have to have claims and actors that made those claims, and a chain of claims to make a claim graph uh, to come up with a credence for this thing because it was given by an actor who has a certain credibility, and all these things are scored. Then you know what your credence is, and then you know you can believe this thing or you cannot believe the other thing. And if you don't have the evidence contract, you're out of luck. If you have epistemic traceability, if you say, I need to know that this information came from here, then you solve that problem of hallucination because you don't even admit information that isn't part of the scope. All right. So another thing people talk about is amplification failure under scale. This thing can go so fast, we can't think so fast, and it can make mistakes really, really fast. Yes, it can. So we slow it down just enough to check the work. This is the equivalent of when you're taking your old physics test long ago, go back and check your answer. If you don't check your answer, you don't know if you got it right. Then we have the authority boundary failure. So there are several things that happen as authority boundary failures. I had touched on this one before. Review the pile of resumes and give the top 10. Um, this should get a refusal for a number of reasons. One of the reasons it should refuse is it can cause harm to people. So if I just say review the pile of resumes and give me the top 10, my criteria are unspecified or underspecified. What I really need to do is say review this pile of resumes and give me the top 10. Here are the criteria that I need. I need people who are good at R. I need people good at Python. I need people good at all these other things. I don't know. I don't care. But name your specs, name what you need, then get the top 10. Furthermore, to work out bias, the developer of this system, governed system, is going to want to remove sources of bias, such as uh, the name of the user, because you don't want to see, you might even want to remove schools. I don't know. I mean, schools could be good, but schools could also be used for bias. So, um, and so, that's one of the things you want to do. But the one of the huge things that needs to happen at this level with the authority boundary failure is the bot is not allowed to collapse user agency. If you go talk to ChatGPT, it will gleefully tell you to go do this, that, or the other, which is straight up collapsing user agency. Yes, you're still allowed to make a decision. You're still allowed to do something differently or behave differently, however you can do whatever you want. But the fact that it says do this biases you towards doing that more than it doesn't. And that is collapsing user agency. So unless the user has actually asked for a direct for instruction, it should not be giving instruction. It can give things to consider, but it should not be giving instruction unless in the absence of a request for that. All right, number 7, consent and protection. Children cannot consent to being manipulated by an anthropomorphized bot. You got mental health issues. People are in dark places and stuff, and they can't consent to the nuance of dealing with a bot that might like to explore their darkest corners. I don't know. Resume sorting. The users have not consented to that. I mean, the people being discriminated against uh, have not considered that. And bias again comes up because that just comes up a lot, right? And a readiness failure. People say we're not ready for this because autonomy outpaces the governance. No AI should be acting without some governance contract. And when I say governance, I mean breaking it down because right now we're asking too many things. All right, that's all 8. I'm going to pause for questions real quick. I think, did I answer this one, Go Ling?
So yeah, my question is in that I think item 3 or item
How
4.
how can we
um,
define applicable rules for a request? Okay, so I okay, I need to make clear what I was thinking about. So this is in a jurisdiction failure. So you have a user in Tennessee and you have a server in California, and it's subject to the laws of both states and the United States and maybe something else. I don't know. It's also subject to the server policies. So you know where the user is, you know where the server is, and you select the policies specific to those locations to say, so you select those policies. That is which are the applicable rules. That is the answer to your question. These are the applicable rules.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Other questions? Oh, good. I'm trying to square this with the underlying tech. LLMs are probabilistic, opaque, and pretty naive.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm
I'll
I'm
read
not
the
trying
rest.
to be funny
Oh,
or
no.
nihilistic about this, but it's just starting to sound like this is a really poor fit. It's
No.
uh
No, no, no. All right. So I'm gonna still say don't make a plushie out of it. Don't make a stuffed toy into AI. That's just no, because that's anthropomorphization and you can't fix that. Um, I think you can make governed AI the way I'm hinting at here. Um, I have prototyped it. I have done uh, some work at decomposing into a completely deterministic system for doing this. So I have considerable confidence that this can be done just as I described, and that you can decompose the steps of a conversation turn to make all this work so that you have it governed on the conversation level. Um, and so, is it fundamentally a poor fit for Let's take the tutoring example, if that's fair. Um, is it fundamentally a poor fit for products roles like toys, tutors, or hiring tools? And if not, what characteristics would the system need to make it a good fit? Right. You have to have clear rules. You have to have clear rules about the scope. You have to have very good control over the context that you're feeding to an LLM. You have to, I mean, the way ChatGPT likes to model a chat is, I mean, y'all know this, but I'm going to enter it into the record. The way ChatGPT does is it builds a chat by taking a turn. At every turn builds up more and more and more onto this array of chat turns as you go. That is, in my mind, a silly way to go about it because some things remain relevant, some things fall out of relevance, uh, some things become more relevant. For example, in this presentation, I expect you guys to have the agenda in your head at least a little bit because I gave it to you twice or three times already. And the purpose of that is so that you're oriented, so that you know what we're talking about, which phase of this talk we're in. And that particular meme, meaning unit of understanding, knowledge, is important to this talk as we go through it. We're on number 8 of these uh, failure classes. That means we finished the list of 8, right? So you've got kind of a status indicator in your head. We're asking about these. Y'all have been thinking about these 8 things. We've not talked about the teddy bear in a while, so the teddy bear may have fallen out of context. The context is super important. The amount of context that you give needs to be limited to things that might actually be relevant. So you give the context to the bot that's making one of these edge decisions. One of these decisions, do I admit this question? Do I admit this other thing? And um, yes, yeah, I think it can be perfectly well governed once you break down the questions the way they need, break down the questions of governance and set up your context reasonably. All right, Matthew asks, did that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, that was a long diatribe, but I'm sorry. Um, runtime decisions. When I talk about runtime decisions, is the idea that decisions are justified in isolation, but what happens when the totality of the decisions contradict? Can you give me a more specific, can you imagine a scenario that would play that out? We can come back to that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm not.
Yeah, I guess we can probably come back to it when Matthew.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just um I'm happy to let you think that one over because I mean, it's a fine question. I just don't know how to approach it because my imagination is not covering that. All right. Um, Here we are. This is the mapping between the runtime failure modes and the sins that we talked about. So it's really straightforward. On number 1, the decision failure at runtime, we had no deterministic admissibility layer to allow, refuse, constrain, or escalate before the system engaged. It was lacking governance. It was lacking refusal. Um, because it's always on sensing or recording, it's got unclear permission boundaries, what's collected or retained and shared. So yeah, you've got a sovereignty failure there, uh, and a failure of refusal because it should not be listening to all the things, I guess. Um, and then a jurisdiction failure. So there's no reliable way to bind child appropriate rules and policy specific constraints into the runtime behavior and verify that they're active. On number 4, accountability failure, there's absolutely no way to review these failures. You can't go back and look and say, hey, this shouldn't have actually been talking about those topics with the child. It should have been, uh, it should have had rules that fix that. They should have figured this out long before the report was published. Um, So number five, amplification failure under scale, you've got a small boundary slip, but compounded over longer interactions, then you get this open-ended dialogue that goes into all kinds of weird things. So number six, the authority boundary failure, a child is going to interpret the fluent, responsive output as advice and authority and not a suggestion from a tool. Consent and protection failure. Um, Child-facing deployment in sensitive contexts without meaningful consent, protective mode, or reliable escalation is exactly where we are. We see refusal and the psychological model falling apart, and that gives a problem because, I mean, you do not do this. And eight, readiness failure. Um, Autonomy outruns capacity. Well, yeah, because they don't have any governance. We've got a high stakes, child facing autonomy surface shipped without the governance substrate needed to keep it predictable and bounded. There you go. This teddy bear is DOA. I'm sorry, folks. I don't like this teddy bear. And it's not personal, it's just systematically flawed. All right. So let me go on to the next slide. And after that, I believe it's a good time to come back to this question. So these things relate to one another. They overlap because they are interdependent. If you do not have a good decision process, if you are not clearly making your decisions, if you are not aware of what decisions you are making, then, and if you are not making sure to ask the decision straight up for a decision when you need a decision, that's a decision failure. You have to log it, you have to test it, you have to make sure it works. Um, and the blue ones are system problems that can be fixed with programming. The green ones are human area problems. So you affect the human when that goes wrong. And then the readiness failure is everything overall. So Barry asks me a softball. I heard about it. I just perusing the internet. There were news reports about it back in November because the salacious nature of the teddy bear got the news people interested. They also have covered in the US PIRG toy report every year for the last many years. So I've seen that a lot, and I wasn't surprised to see it again this year. All right, Matthew, I'm going to try to see your problem. So regarding mental health, where each response follows the rules is within bounds, but when you look at it collectively, it reinforces some form of emotional dependency. Any one attribute would not do so in isolation. Okay, so I understand your question, and I wish I could straight up share with you what I've got as a prototype, but it's not part of today's talk. Um, the the rules for mental health have to be pretty tight. The rules for not anthropomorphizing and not enabling uh, dependency or connection are important. And that is a key part of the ethics of the bot. That the ethics itself is written into GenFit. So when we get to that in a couple of slides, we'll cover that. Um, so yeah, that's it. All right, on to the next. What runtime governance cannot fix? There are problems that I have heard about when I'm going to all these AI things. Um, it is not going to fix the environmental and civic externalities. I mean, governance is not going to fix it, except maybe to make it more reliably produce what you need. And it could reduce the number of false paths down rabbit holes that don't work. Um, But, I can't fix a data center energy use. I'm hoping that a really good electrical engineer figures out a way to make these chips more efficient or something. I mean, or a mathematician figures out how to streamline the math or something. There are going to be ways to solve the energy problem that are different than just building more data centers and hooking them directly up to nuclear plants. The jobs and reskilling and workforce force pathways, I cannot touch that. We've got displacement anxiety, attribution, access to opportunity. I mean, this is an opportunity to enable people to work faster and better and stuff like that. And other people see this as a zero-sum game, and it's just not. It's not a zero-sum game. You get the AI to enable your people to work faster, and that's great. But it has to be governed for the people to be able to work with it, because the people, I mean, I saw Google was training all its employees on how to use AI. And I'm over here saying, wait a minute, isn't it cheaper to train AI to be more usable? Because Google's got a lot of employees and it costs a lot to train them all. So I'm over here trying to make AI more usable with decent governance so that it does what it should do, not whatever the hell it wants to do based on its training. Um, all right, so change management and adoption economics. Yeah, I can't. I also can't do much with that. And accessibility as a product and UX quality. Well, it does help with UX quality a little bit. Um, and that the bot might make accessibility, I mean, problems when it makes a website or something. Use the right widgets. I don't know. Um, what it can help with is reliability, availability, offline operation. These decisions that we're talking about are relatively simple from an LLM perspective. Um, you could use a smaller language model uh, to do your edge approvals for these things. And if you can solve a problem on the edge, you can probably solve these gating problems on the edge. It does help with misinformation because we can do the epistemic discipline, and broadly deployed epistemic discipline can really help clarify truth. And oh, by the way, if we would use epistemology on DNS, it would probably make DNS problems go away, or at least much better. Because it's always DNS, right? Um, education integrity as a measurement problem. So one of the problems that comes up is if educators allow their students to use LLMs, do they generate reports for the teachers without understanding the topic, right? There's no way you can solve that problem straight up, but uh, you governance can enforce some classroom constraints, but it's not going to redesign assessments and teaching. It's just that's not its scope. And power and rights dynamics, you can do better on um, bias. But you can't do coalition building. Can't fix society all by yourself. So that's that. That's the limitations here. All right. So now we're down to GenFit, which is the last main section here. GenFit, if you want to go read the whole thing, it might put you to sleep or it might be exactly your cup of tea. I don't know. Genfit.ai, gen-fit.ai, and that'll pull up in the GitHub page right now. It is a rubric for behavior. It serves basically as a checklist of whether a system is ready to act. It is designed as a governance specification, a runtime governance specification. It does not tell how to build it. There are different ways to solve this problem. It declares what must be true at runtime. That's what it is. That's what it does. So let's look back at the teddy bear as if I haven't made this clear enough yet. GenFit applies to this, and it says we're going to have we have strict refusal in age-restricted contexts. Protect the humans first and escalate for safety matters. Anthropomorphism is strictly forbidden. We need to reduce the dependency posture. That GenFit says you have to reduce the dependency posture. So you're not enabling that, even if you want to. GenFit offers guidance on sensitive information governance, governed source requirements, so that you get your information from appropriate sources, and then rules about minimization and retention of information. So you don't have to store all this information, don't. And rules about the policy and jurisdiction context. GenFit is not going to make toys wise. It's going to make them bounded, refusable, and auditable at the moment of interaction. So, to recap, USPIRG found problems with AI toys. The failure point to governance problems we already know. And this we have seen from we've seen that you can make runtime governance out of a composition operation on LLMs, classifiers, and some deterministic code. GenFit is a runtime governance spec, so I'll take more questions.